Hello, what's going on? You are watching Moving Pictures Kenya. My name is Bonventure and this is what's going on. Last week I made a video about the 5% proposed tax on diaspora remittances, and one of my subscribers in Kenya, his name is Evans Onzere, asked me, you have used the word US national and US citizen interchangeably. So do they mean one and the same thing? So as usual, I went and did further research kuelewa what is the difference between US national and US citizen. Because all this information you cannot have it at hand, lazima ufanye some research. All USA citizens are USA nationals, but not all USA nationals are USA citizens. So what that means is a USA citizen is somebody who holds USA citizenship. This may be by birth or through naturalization. And then a USA national is not necessarily a citizen, but is somebody who owes allegiance to the United States of America. So like for example, people from the American Samoa and the Sweden Islands are not really American citizens, but they are American nationals. They cannot vote in the US elections, they cannot hold public office in the US, but they can work in the USA without a visa. But USA citizens, they have citizenship, they vote in the general elections, then they can hold public office, they can be juries. So that is the difference. Today, I want us to continue with our conversation on the one big beautiful bill. This is basically the budget making process here in the USA, and ukikumbuka, Trump made a lot of promises during the election campaigns. Na hizi promises zote ameziconsolidate into what he's calling the one big beautiful bill. If you remember in my last video, we were talking about the proposed 5% tax on diaspora remittances, and today we want to talk about something else that Trump really talked about: no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. You remember in my last video, the bill had gone through the USA House of Representatives na sasa ikaenda Senate. So in the Senate, let me tell you a bit more about the USA Senate. The USA is composed of 50 states, and each state is represented in the Senate by 2 senators. So 2 for each state to make 100 senators. Currently, the Republicans have an upper hand in the Senate because they have 53 senators. The Democrats have 45 senators and 2 independent senators to make a total of 100. So for a bill to pass through Senate, especially like the current one, it requires a simple majority. Simple majority is what others say 50 plus 1. So it requires more than 50 senators to make or to pass. So if it gets 51 senators, then it passes through. So clearly, what the Republicans require is just 51 votes to pass this particular bill. The other thing you need to know about the US Senate is at the time of voting, in case there is a tie, remember they are 100. So in case they tie at 50-50, then the deciding vote will be cast by the Vice President of the United States of America. So if like for example the current bill, when they vote it comes to a tie, then the US Vice President, who is currently J.D. Vance, will come and vote. And considering that J.D. Vance is a Republican, then it means Republicans will carry the day. So that is briefly about the USA Senate. But now, let us talk about the 2 things that Trump talked about, and that is no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. So, for those of you who know anybody who has worked in the hospitality industry, especially like the hotel workers, the waiters, their salary is usually very small. So what makes them earn money is the tips. Without tips, then nobody can survive on the salary of a waiter. And that is why this was a big deal for Trump and the people of the USA during the last elections. Like, for example, I work with somebody. He's a fairly young man, and he told me when he was working as a waiter, he was earning $3 per hour. So what used to help him is the tips, which could improve his earnings. But just mshahara ya waiter ilikuwa $3 per hour, which is very small. Regarding overtime, when you work overtime here in the USA, your rate goes to 1.5 times. What most people call here time and a half. So like, for example, if you are working for $10 per hour, then your pay when you are working overtime will go to $15 per hour. And then if you work on a public holiday, some companies will pay you even up to 3 times per hour, because they'll pay you the holiday pay, and then they'll pay you your pay for working, and then they pay you the overtime pay. So like somebody working for $10 an hour on a holiday may end up getting like $30 per hour. That is what some of the companies do. They usually call it premium salary. If you look at the bill, it says not everybody will earn overtime, and not everybody will claim the tax on the tips. Some of the people who are affected by this no tax on tips and no tax on overtime are basically those people working in the hotel industry, and I think some of the healthcare workers, and those in law enforcement. There is a big conversation on how these particular changes are going to be effected. Kuna watu wengi sana wanasema it's a complex issue which may never be implemented, because it requires like people to change their systems, some other people to be trained. So many things have to happen before the bill is implemented in full. So kuna wale wako na doubts whether hii bill itapita ama itakwama. But the way it is expected to work is when you work overtime, that particular pay on overtime will not be included in your taxable pay. So when they are computing the tax for your financial year, then the overtime pay will be a non-taxable income. So it will not be included in the amount of money you are going to be taxed on. The same with the tips. When they are computing your taxable income, then the tips will be excluded. So this means that somebody who has overtime or somebody who has tips will have a big take-home pay at the end of the day. Briefly, let me take you through the steps that this bill will go through before it becomes effective. You remember, the bill first of all was drafted. So it went through the drafting stage. Then after drafting, it went to the USA House of Representatives. When it passed through the USA House of Representatives, it went to the Senate. So if it passes through the Senate, then the bill will go to President Trump for signature. Once the bill has been signed into law, the effective dates will vary depending on the provisions of this particular bill. So like, for example, this no tax on tips and no tax on overtime will cover the period 2025 to 2028. So that means like this year, 2025, at the end of the year, all those people who have gotten tips, their tips will not be taxed. However, it is capped at, I think, $25,000. So if your tips are in excess of $25,000, then the excess will be taxed. And also for those people who earn overtime, their overtime will not be taxed. I think it also has the same capping of $25,000. So anything in excess of $25,000 will be taxed. There is also a limitation as to how much money somebody can make in a year. And I think it's capped at $160,000. So anybody making more than $160,000 will not be eligible. Here is what the bill says. This provision creates an above-the-line deduction for overtime premium pay during a given taxable year. Qualified overtime compensation means overtime compensation paid to an individual required under Section 7 of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 that is in excess of the regular rate at which such individual is employed. Additionally, taxpayers who are highly compensated employees are ineligible to receive the deduction. A work-eligible Social Security number is required in order to claim the deduction. The deduction is allowed from tax years 2025 through 2028. For no tax on tips, this is what the provision says. This provision creates an above-the-line deduction for qualified tips received by an individual in an occupation which traditionally and customarily receives tips during a given taxable year. In order to be considered a qualified tip, the tip amount must be paid voluntarily, is not subject to negotiation, and is determined by the payer. The bill goes further to say that qualified tips must be received voluntarily by an individual in an occupation that traditionally and customarily receives tips on or before December 31st, 2024, as provided by the Secretary of the Treasury. Additionally, highly compensated employees are ineligible to receive this deduction. Basically, that is what the bill talks about. Thank you for watching Moving Pictures Kenya. My name is Bonventure, and see you next time when we will be looking at the Finance Bill of Kenya 2025. Asanteni sana.